Her stupid, shivering fingers almost dropped the box of matches, scattering the last vestiges of hope into the cold mud. Margot slid the box shut, squeezed her fingers into a fist, willing them to stop moving before they killed her. The few remaining sticks in that blue cardboard box adorned with white letters and rough striker pads were more than simple twigs with phosphorus sesquisulfide tips. They were her life. Snuffling sounds rose from beyond a line of gravestones a few yards off. Margot froze in place. Sounded like a big dog. She knew better. It was no dog. Also, it was back. And if it caught her out here the way it had Dennis or Will, then the tremors in her fingers were not gone, but they were more controlled. She slid the box open once more. She fished inside and fetched out a single match from the remaining half-dozen. Took care to slide the box shut again. Dragged the head across the upper striker pad and prayed it did not break. With a soft hiss, the match flared to life, revealing the eerie grin and wide eyes atop the gravestone before her. She pushed the match in through the hole Dennis sawed into the gourd's top. The match found the wick of the tea light candle down where the tongue might have been. She held it as steady as possible until it caught, and then moved to the second tea light. Finally, the flame reached her thumb, and she hissed, dropping the stick into the pulp. The smell of burnt meat rose, mingling with the stench of blood still clinging inside her nostrils. The jack-o'-lantern's gaping grin, hint of a nose, and wide eyes were already aglow from the twin flames within. They bathed the area before her with soft comfort. It revealed the nervous tracks in the mud as clearly as it illuminated the wide gravestone's dedication to a family whose name meant nothing to her, or the sticky blood caking her left hand like a glove. The snuffling sounds ceased. Sudden, crunching noises headed away into the graveyard. Margot turned her head to the side and exhaled a breath she had not been aware of holding. Safe for now, at least until another gusty breeze came along. She replaced the pumpkin's lid, twisting the stem until the jagged, triangular cuts settled into their proper place. Margot then lifted the pumpkin with both hands. This was a modest-sized gourd, taller than it was fat. The surface bulged in places, as though distorted by tumors. It was not the kind of pumpkin you bought at the grocery store, one of the quality gourds sold by the crateful. No, this one came direct from Tugas Farm, one of the creepy-looking things that should have been churned into hog food. Dennis fell in love with it at first sight, seeing the face he would put upon it. Of the 3 pumpkins they bought, only Dennis's survived to this point. Then again, if any of them thought an All Saints' Day visit to the Deschamps Cemetery would end up like this, they might have brought something more substantial than jack-o'-lanterns and a mostly empty box of kitchen matches, if they had known. Overhead, clouds raced across the sky, obscuring the waning quarter moon's light. Margot found her bearings and moved. The soft terrain squelched around every step. Why had they come so far in? The ritual had seemed harmless enough. Silly, in fact. They could have done it by Father's grave as easily as the lonesome clearing by the old McGucket tomb. But Will demanded they pay strict heed to the letter of the law. How were they supposed to reap the harvest otherwise? Will was always such a pedant. A beautiful boy who became a handsome damned fool man in middle age, but who never lost his keen appreciation for rules, including the bending thereof. He might have been annoying at Monopoly when he and his twin sister were 9 years old, and he might have grown to annoy those pesky antitrust laws as his eye turned toward reaping the benefits of business investments through maximized market share, but he did not deserve, and neither did Dennis. Neither did she, really. Margot snuffled back a nose full of snot, feeling it descend into her throat. Her vision went soupy for a moment as tears threatened to fall. This was not the time, she told herself. Mourn later. Mourn when the car door slammed shut and she was free of this place. Mourn when Deschamps Cemetery was fading in the rearview mirror. Mourn when safe at home, showering the blood off her hand and arms and clothes. Mourn while shivering in bed. Nestled under the 1,000-thread count sateen sheets, weighted blanket and duvet, weep like a baby in a cocoon of warmth, while foisting off the last remnants of the evening's chill. Mourn when safe. Not here. Not with that snuffling. The crunch of leaves told her the beast was back and trotting closer. She turned and held the pumpkin out as far as she dared, letting the glowing face shine in the night. Still the snuffler came. A sudden chill preceded the question. Is it no longer afraid of firelight? The pumpkins were supposed to keep away any beasts drawn by the ritual. They were supposed to keep us safe. Tell that to Dennis, who shrieked as clawed hands dragged him out of Margot's blood-slicked clutches and into the McGucket tomb. Tell that to Will, who tried to salvage his pumpkin after tripping over a memorial vase and found himself swallowed by a snuffling, growling appetite. His gore spewed up in a 10-foot-tall geyser. When the pumpkins failed, someone died. She had almost been the final victim just a half a minute and a few yards ago. As she raised the pumpkin to head level, the heavens themselves responded. The moon peeked momentarily through a hole in the clouds, bathing the vast burial grounds in its silvery glow. The wind around Margot picked up as well, kicking up some dead leaves around her knee-high Doc Martens and teasing the dangling edge of the peasant blouse hanging below the stylish sapphire blue leather jacket. As the wind's intensity increased to toss her shoulder-length dirty blonde curls, it also brought a disturbing flicking to the pumpkin's candle flames. The snuffling sounds continued, but the forward motion ceased. It hunkered down somewhere out there, watching, waiting for the perfect opportunity. Margot imagined the thing cowering there in the shadows of the gravestones, eyes gleaming with that same mixture of hunger and hatred she saw after the door to the McGucket tomb yawned slowly open. It had been Dennis who strode forward, blinded by greed and eager for the fruits of the evening's labor. Dennis had not brought his gourd, thinking it superfluous now that the chanting was done. Dennis had made a terrible and final mistake. Margot saw those eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. Their pupils were inhuman, the diamond-shaped slits she associated with serpents. She even caught a hint of the head they were set into, something that bulged around the jaw in a way far more canine than human. The smile that preceded its strike showed more teeth than a shark. Dennis's name passed her lips a fraction of a second too late. What moonlight blessed their activities vanished behind a cloud bank, and the pumpkins were too far away to offer Dennis their protective aura. And the thing emerged and retreated, faster than any trapdoor spider. This beast moved as fast as lightning. Margot had not seen enough of the beast to make sense of it. The thing moved so, and it donned shadows the way she donned her couture. There were reaching arms and talons as long as her pinky fingers. There was a grin that struck terror in her heart, and a body that seemed sleek yet powerful, a living muscle. This was a living knife of a beast. It snatched Dennis around the legs, yanked hard enough to throw him to his butt. The beautiful man rolled onto his belly and reached for her and Will, not yet starting to shriek. Without thinking, she sped forward and grabbed his outstretched hand. The blood on his left made her right hand's grip precarious. Her own left hand's wound stole much of the strength from it. The thing in the tomb, it stole him right out of her clutches. His shrieks began before the beast drew him into the shadows and took its first bite. Did she see those narrowed serpent eyes peering from between two stones? Did she see the lips peeling away to reveal those terrible teeth? God, she hoped not. She prayed not. The wind was getting a little more pronounced. Margot's shoulders ached and her arms burned. If she continued to hold Dennis's pumpkin out this way for much longer, she would surely drop it, or the candle would go out. The snuffling sounds turned into a snort then, a sound of disgust. The scampering sounds once more vanished into the cemetery, the beast retreating once again. Satisfied, she brought the pumpkin closer, cradled the gourd against her chest, a protective mother with her babe. Once more she walked, the tights squeezing her thighs beneath the skirt brushed together with a whisk, whisk, whisk as she moved. Her soles left prints of her progress. Not 5 minutes later, Margot's gait slowed. The late-night chill seeped all the way into her bones now. Movement was a chore. Push on, she told herself. Don't let it take you. Just before he disappeared into the tomb to become the first course of the beast's feast, Dennis's face betrayed such agonies, even before his mouth offered up the sounds of the pain and fear. She knew he was beyond help. Will must have known as well because he came for his sister, catching Margot by the shoulder and dragging her into the protective glow. He shoved her own gourd into her hands, but she was too numb to hold it for long. It tumbled free and smashed to pieces. He cursed and shoved Dennis's jack-o'-lantern into her hands. "Fuck no!" She cradled it close, the way she'd cradled Dennis's head to her chest after a particularly exhausting bout of sweaty, satisfying love. The pumpkin did not gasp the way he did after his climaxes. Oddly enough, the size of the thing was not far off from the size of his own head. Will barked orders to move, to forget the treasure, and to leave Dennis. He wailed for her to hurry. Damn it all, get in gear. He would lead them out. He would lead them to safety. Well, he had not done any of that, had he? He led them a couple of yards at most. Then fate or happenstance struck. He barely had time to curse, barely had time to look at the last remaining gourd in her hands, with an eye that wanted it so desperately much. He did not even reach for it before the beast reached for him, and his own screams and blood raced one another for the clouds, darting across the heavens. She was alone. Well, if not alone, then the last living human being in this necropolis. She cradled the pumpkin and forced her legs to move, willed her feet to march, one ahead of the other. Go, go, go. The moonlight diminished. Then, as the clouds once more masked the great reflective rock, ahead she saw a twinkling glow, and her heart hammered with hope. Perhaps she was not alone out here after all. A light of some kind. It had to be a lamp, a kerosene lantern maybe. Something man-made. It stood to reason there had to be people over there by it. If she could only get to them. "Stop thinking," she scolded herself, "and get going." Her voice sounded far too loud to be safe, even though it barely peaked over a whisper. A shiver crept up her spine. Then again, the beast already knew where she was. Why bother being quiet? The answer to that was self-evident. She carried a superstitious dread of other beasts out there in the dark, as yet unaware of her existence. One squeak at the wrong moment and they would all descend upon her. One was bad enough. More made this already difficult situation seemingly impossible. The hands holding the pumpkin trembled far more than fear. The cold was getting to be too much. She was not dressed for this. The forecast had not called for overnight lows this cold. It was still an hour until midnight. But Margot's breath emerged as misty plumes. She was having trouble feeling her feet. Her thumbs might have been severed for all she could sense them or sense their movements. The grinning jack-o'-lantern's light showed her the way. As she neared the artificial light, she heard a young woman's voice. As she closed in, she realized the woman was speaking to an audience of living souls, not to the dead.
"And when they finally got home,"
the young woman said, her voice low and taut as a drawn fishing line,
"they found a hook on the passenger side door handle, the end still bloody from being rudely wrenched from the escaped lunatic's arms."
A kid's version of a wicked laugh followed this. Margot stumbled forward, and with a whoop, almost fell into a circle of 6 preteen girls. They all screeched or gasped in fright. The storyteller was seated on a low, standing gravestone, and though she'd just finished priming the others for fright, she just about screamed. She was dressed in an unzipped winter coat, her hair short and spiky. To save face, she turned her scream into a snarl.
What are you doing, lady? You just about scared the piss out of us.
Kids. A group of kids on that border between childhood and teenage years. A kerosene lamp sat on the ground between them, much more controlled than any campfire, though it did nothing to battle the night's cold. Margot guessed they snuck out from some sleepover at a nearby house and came here to tell scary stories on the Friday night after Halloween. A chubby girl in artfully slashed denim and a shiny pink coat asked,
"You okay?"
A round-faced, but otherwise stick-skinny girl with hair in her eyes and shocking red boots stage whispered,
"Bitch and pumpkin?"
A black girl next to her said,
"You mean bitch with a pumpkin, don't you?"
A nervous laughter rippled through the gathering. The scare was over, and they were catching up with their leader's effort to save face with one another. Kids. Screw this.
"Sorry,"
Margot said.
"Just playing through."
None of them seemed to understand the golfing reference, not that she blamed them. It was something Will said with increasing frequency after he reached the age when the game shifted from a nice walk ruined to something far more involving. It was a girl with chunky, framed round glasses that said,
"Hey, you're that woman, right? The one whose brother owes the feds like $1 million? $1 million too, maybe?"
This girl was outfitted in a bright orange coat and a frilly-looking dress. She wore her dark hair in tiny meatballs on either side of her crown. This look did not work terribly well for her, since it allowed her ears free rein to reveal just how much they flapped out on either side of her head. Margot guessed she got teased for the glasses and the ears, and perhaps for the nasal quality of her voice. The leader immediately asked,
"Margot Williamson?"
She stared at Margot's face, trying to read something from her.
"No way. Not here. Not this far from the city. Have a nice night, girls,"
Margot said, wondering if the beast might slake its thirst or hunger on them. It might buy Margot a few minutes. At what cost, though? She stopped just the other side, as the hushed campaign of cutting whispers began. Damn, but girls never changed, did they? Her teeth were chattering when she said,
"You need to go home now. Get out of here." "Excuse me?"
the leader asked.
"Lady, you're not the mom of us." "Be that as it may,"
Margot said.
"you need to get your asses out of here if you don't want to end up dead." "Dead?"
The one in glasses and hair meatballs asked.
"What are you talking about?" "The beast is out there,"
she said.
"We came here for wealth, but called up something horrible. It's coming now."
They did not look convinced. Margot nestled the pumpkin against her side to more easily show off the left hand's bloody decoration. The girls gaped and gasped.
"Go now, or you'll die." "Did you arrange this, Lo?"
the chubby one asked.
"To make your stupid stories actually scary? I got nothing to do with this."
Lo, the leader said. The snuffling sound was closing in. Margot cursed under her breath.
"Get out!"
She snapped and kicked at the nearest of the girls. It was the one with her bangs in her eyes. The kick missed wildly, but the mud on the end of her boot flew off and splattered across the girl's chin and throat and jacket. The girl gulped and fumed, fumbling around various curses without actually deciding on which one to utter in its entirety. She raced up and lashed out, and the jack-o'-lantern tumbled from Margot's hands, bounced once off the top of a gravestone, vomited up 2 of the tea lights, then hit the ground with a dull splut. The free tea light hit a puddle of mud and extinguished immediately. The pumpkin, though.
"Oh no!"
Margot dragged it up from the mud, the face folded down over itself as though someone drew a horizontal crease through the nose. It called up early memories of Margot's great-grandmother, whose face seemed like a rubber mask stretched over a balloon with a slow leak.
"No,"
she whispered, and the tears flowed. Would it still work? The gourd might be broken, but at least it was not smashed to bits. It was still whole. One flickering candle remained, but even that extinguished as she watched.
No.
The girl with the long bangs backed up, watching Margot with a look of purest disgust, tinged with the dread a germaphobe has for catching some superbug. She showed her palms as though ready to protest in any wrongdoing on her part as self-defense.
She's broken or something. It's not worth my time.
The other girls stared on with silent anticipation. If Margot made a move toward them, she suspected they might scatter. She was too annoyed. Margot set the messy jack-o'-lantern on the gravestone. The cap fell off, landing in the mud below. She fumbled the box of matches out of her pocket and slid it open. It turned out to be upside down. The matches tumbled through her fingers. She wailed like a banshee and crouched down to find at least one match. From nearby, the snuffling sounds returned. The crunch of footfalls on leaves. Most of the girls were oblivious to that. Only the chubby girl seemed to notice, and though she raised the concern, the others were intent on Margot. The matches were screwed. Filthy. No way they would work. Of course, the numbness in Margot's fingers would more often push the possibilities deeper into the dirt instead of pluck them up.
This one looks like it'll work.
Slender Fingers offered the last good match. The girl with glasses and big ears was the one to offer it. Margot muttered appreciation and ran the match across the striker strip. It flared to life. She shoved it through the gaping hole in the gourd's crown. The tea light inside was seriously messed up when the gourd took its tumble. The wax was all melted and much of it splashed out of the tiny silver cup. A scant amount remained, and what wick filled it was too long to stand properly upright. If the flame took, how long would the light source last? Minutes? Seconds?
Stupid girl!
Margot whispered.
Brash, rude, stupid! Screw you, lady!
The girl with the too long bangs snarled, but there was no venom there. Lo, the leader, said,
Just go, huh? Crazy lady? Don't make me get the pepper spray.
Margot held the jack-o'-lantern aloft in both hands, directly overhead, wheeled around to face the leader in the way she'd come. The beast was already on the move. Rising up from behind the gravestone Lo sat upon. Its talons stretched up to pluck the girl by the back of her neck. It froze, however, when the crumpling gourd's lone candle flame illuminated it. The pieces she'd caught from before connected into a terrible hole. Here was the beast, visible from the waist up. It was humanoid enough to pass in bad light, though the flanks were a little too bulky to pass for shoulders, and the section below the ribs a little too narrow to pass for an actual waist. Its shape recalled a greyhound, lean but strong, mixed with the big cat's natural weapons. The head had a pronounced muzzle, slathered with blood, not to be consigned to any single channel on the species classification list. Its eyes gave it a reptilian cast, as did the hint of scales around its upper chest. It froze for an instant in the candlelight, and then dropped immediately out of sight. Margot could have wasted time wondering how such a tiny tea light showed so much of the horror, but she was just glad it was gone. The heavy girl blubbered with terror.
What was that?
She alone saw it. Everyone else focused on Margot and missed the actual threat. Even the beast's near victim did not realize how close she'd come to peril. Lo demanded,
What was what, Fi? Something big!
Fi, the heavy girl said, and shoved upright to her feet before pointing, a terror-trembling finger past Lo's shoulder.
Something scary! Right behind you!
Lo hopped off the stone and looked.
There's nothing there. What did you see?
Margot said,
She saw what I was talking about. The beast is on the prowl. It came out of the McGucket tomb. The McGucket tomb?
Asked the girl with the glasses.
Why were you out there? We wanted some of the wealth they took with them.
Lo laughed.
The McGuckets died flat broke. Only reason they have a tomb is because of family. There's no treasure buried out there. I'm going,
Margot said.
I have to get to my car before the beast comes back. Before...
She shifted the pumpkin slightly, indicating it without threatening to extinguish the tea light. That flame was the one thing to see her safely out of here. This was the candle to light her to bed. And if she did not make it, the chopper seeking her head was fast on her heels.
I hope you get home safe.
The chubby girl was rousing her friends to haul ass, and it didn't take long. Lowe's storytelling was the instigator. Margot's arrival only heightened their fright, and now the hint of a real horror got them moving. She was glad. At least they had a fighting chance. Sure, Lowe was mouthing off about wanting to stick around, check the so-called monster out, but she was the only one. Peer pressure would drag her along with her friends. Margot hurried the rest of the way to the cemetery gates. The candlelight saw her all the way to the parking lot, where her Lexus was parked next to Will's BMW. When she saw that place, she paused long enough to fetch the keys from her purse and tap the fob. The Lexus offered a soft beep and flashed both turn signals to let her know the driver's side door was now unlocked. Then she passed through the gates. The light was almost out. There were just scant seconds left, half a minute at most. However, the moon peered through a hole in the clouds long enough to reveal the shape sitting on the asphalt in front of her car. Her heart hammered out a fast beat. The beast! How did it get ahead of me? But no. The figure stood up, dusted off its pants. The moonlight showed the black hair parted on the right. It made a skull impression of the face itself, with healthy applications of shadows around the eyes and nose. But she knew the cologne well enough even before the figure flicked its wrist to the left, setting a flip-top lighter ablaze, and the flame banished the shadows from his face. She knew him even before he said,
"So, you made it out. Great."
Will?
She asked.
How?
I got away easy.
His hand flicked the hand holding the gold DuPont lighter the other way, closing the lid and extinguishing the flame.
The old fountain of blood trick. A little twiddle here, a bag of pig's blood there in the pocket, and voila.
He waggled his fingers like a magician.
That's one sad-looking jack-o'-lantern. But it worked, huh?
She said.
We need to get out of here.
Sure.
He said, lighting the DuPont once more.
But there's one more thing. We didn't get the money. There is no money.
Margot said.
The McGuckets died flat broke.
So you know about that.
He chuckled and extinguished the lighter.
It was a good story, though, right? Got you and Dennis out here. Millions there just for the asking.
Story?
She asked. She shook her head, and then a new numbness settled inside of her head.
Don't tell me this is about Dad's trust.
If you go, I get the whole thing.
But if I'm killed?
She began.
You won't get...
The beast is a devourer.
He explained.
No body, no crime. What constable or cop is going to look into a monster angle? I'll fall under suspicion for a while, sure, but you'll be gone.
He sighed and set the lighter burning brightly once more.
Looks like your time's up, babe.
She glanced down and saw the sagging grins glowing was gone. The jack-o'-lantern was out.
Sorry, sis,
he said. A flick of his wrist extinguished the lighter. There was no sense reasoning with him. No sense trying to appeal as his twin sister. He set his sights on the goal. He knew the rules and he was working them to his own advantage. The kids were right, of course. He owed millions, and not just to the tax people. There were others. The promise of quick, untraceable cash was impossible to ignore. A little ritual, one of the things he specialized in since he'd done such things to get himself the first fortune, and then done another to give his sister monetary comfort as well. The snuffling sounds were at the gates behind her. Margot threw the useless pumpkin at her brother, expecting him to duck aside. He froze, however, surprised by the suddenness of her action. He caught the thing, and his gold lighter hit the ground with a thud. She ran to the driver's side door and dragged it open, pulled herself inside, yanked the door shut. As her cold hands fumbled the keys into the ignition, Margot watched a shape explode through the gates. The beast was eager. Her brother lobbed the deflated jack-o'-lantern to the left as he ducked, presumably searching for his keys. The Lexus's engine turned over immediately. The daytime running lights came on in time to catch the beast. Full on. It had not been going for him, but for her. The headlights were too much for it, however. To coax it further, she triggered her brights. The beast snarled and held one clawed hand over its hideous face. As she backed up, She saw her brother clutch the lighter, but offer her a single contemptuous glare. Then she turned her car toward the exit and hit the gas. Out of the corner of her eyes, she saw her brother flick his wrist. The jolt on the concrete must have been too much for the pretty expensive bauble, however. It did not light that time. Will did not get a second chance. The beast was on him. Margot sped away, mind frantic in its attempts to form some kind of story, to assemble some kind of sense. There was no sense to be had, however. Will had lured her and Dennis out here to kill them. It worked halfway. When she was a mile down, Margot pulled the car off to the side of the road and cried, banged one fist against the steering wheel as the ache of losing Dennis became undeniably real, impossibly large. After she cried, she finished driving back home. Unlike what the children assumed, Margot did not live in the city. She lived in an affluent stretch of suburbia. She would neither wash her hand nor clean the wound before calling the police to tell them Will hurt her. Tell them he took Dennis away. Tell them something to get them looking away from her. They would not understand or believe the truth, the bit about the beast. But they had to know that he was a deranged killer. Someone had to know. Her footprints were all over that graveyard, so there was no use denying she was there. And she decided then that every year thereafter, when pumpkins came into season, she would surround herself with them. Jack-o'-lanterns were the one thing that saw her to safety. And she hoped they would keep her safe forevermore.